I was 8 when I got my pen pal. It was a project at school. We were to write a letter about ourselves with our mailing address and our picture included. Then we'd tie each letter to a balloon and let them go. The goal was to practice letter writing and befriend someone in the process. To be honest, it wasn't such a bad idea if you ignored how dangerous it was. I think most of the kids got other kids to write to. Maybe a couple of them got tourists just dropping by for a week or two. It was just luck. Whoever found your letter was your pen pal. The first letter I got from my pen pal was as innocent as you could get. Percy and his wife Molly had sent a photo of them and their animals. They've got a dog named Jukebox, who is a husky male-mute mix, a Maine Coon cat named Indigo, and a box turtle named Webster. I found myself wishing they could be my family. I wished that I could snuggle up with Jukebox and take walks with Percy and Molly. I was a kid from an unstable home life, and I craved the normalcy Percy and Molly had. I told them everything. I told them when my sister got mad and hit me. I told them when my foster parents got mad and hit Addison. I told them about being kicked out and meeting our neighbors, the Landrys, an old couple who never failed to be Addison and I's safe space. For about 6 months, Percy was my best friend. That is, until I was moved to a different home, and I didn't tell him I was moving. I could have sent a letter to his address and told him, but I remembered the last letter he had sent. It had no postage stamp, meaning it had been hand-delivered. Something about that fact terrified me so much I told Addison about it. She slapped me around a bit, and then forbade me from talking to Percy. "He's probably a criminal. God, you're so stupid," she said after lecturing me on why I shouldn't have responded to him. Years passed, but Percy never forgot. He was the only one outside of the Landrys who knew that Addison and I shared a different birthday, despite being twins. He never failed to send a birthday card on the 6th of May, no matter what foster home we jumped to. The cards were your stereotypical drugstore birthday cards. Percy and Holly always wrote a handwritten note below it, wishing me a happy birthday. As the years dragged on, I started to realize how creepy that was. How unsettling it was that he knew what foster home I had moved into. That he was keeping tabs on me somehow. It wasn't until I met him in person that I realized how dangerous both he and Molly were. It was a normal night for Addison and I. We were hiking down the road that would take us to the Landrys, who we knew would be the only people up at 2 a.m., though our last foster placement had taken us miles from their home. Every time we were kicked out, we would make the hike, rain or shine. Addison spent the bulk of the walk telling me how horrible I was and that I had caused this. Addison does that a lot, and I've begun to realize that she even blames me when it's her fault. I've come to believe that she can't blame herself because it hurts too much. So she blames me, and she hurts me because she knows I'm the only one who will put up with it. She stopped mid-insult when the minivan came up behind us. The engine made an awful clunking sound. Addison would know why. She's an expert with cars. She grabbed my arm gently. "Don't talk and follow my lead," she said softly. I barely nodded confirmation. The minivan stopped next to us and the passenger window was rolled down. I didn't recognize the woman, curly hair and a pudgy face. But the man, I recognized. I sucked in a gasp of air when I saw him, causing Addison to squeeze my arm tighter. "What are you two doing out here all by yourselves?" the man asked. Addison put on a sweet smile. "Oh, We're just walking home. This one got sick, she says, referring to me. I looked at the ground so I didn't have to look at his face. How about we take you? It's far too late to be walking home. Addison shook her head. We're fine. You understand, she said, shooting daggers at the man. He smiled pleasantly. Get in the car, he said in a cold voice, smile gone from his face. Addison meets his stare. Not a chance, fat man, she shot back, breaking into a run and dragging me with her. She screamed as she ran, yelling about being kidnapped. She was trying to make sure someone heard her. But I think we both know that everyone in the town was dead asleep, except for the Landrys who are stone deaf. She yelled anyways. She screamed louder than I've ever heard her scream before. I saw the Landry's farmhouse as we ran, and I almost thought we were going to make it, that Addison's running had saved us, until a hand grabbed my hoodie and yanked me back. A strangled yell escaped my throat as the jacket choked me. Addison skidded to a stop and came back for me. Let him go, she screamed, the same anger back. Only this time she was angrier than I had ever seen her before, and for the first time, it's not at me. Molly dear, some help, called Percy, who now had me firmly in his grasp. Of course, she called from the van, emerging with a gun. I suggest you shut it, girl, and get in the van. Addison stopped screaming, but her eyes conveyed just how much she wanted to rip them to pieces. Addison did what they said, climbing into the van and sitting in the back where Molly told her to. Molly slammed the door shut and then looked at me. Otto, you've grown so much, she exclaimed like a grandmother seeing her grandchild. Please, let us go, I said, making my voice sound extra pathetic, so they'd feel bad. Oh, honey, after seeing how those people treated you, we had to do this. No child should be treated like that, she said, clicking her tongue. You'll come home with us, and we'll be a family. I'm sure you'd love to see Jukebox, Percy said, and Molly giggled. But we can't, I said, and I know it was the wrong thing because Molly's smile dropped. Why, of course you can. You're our boy. I shake my head. But I'm not. This is kidnapping, I said more forcefully. Molly grabbed my chin with her hands so tight, I know I'll end up having a bruise. We're saving you from all those so-called parents, and from her. Holly pointed a shaky hand to Addison, whose face was pressed up against the glass. Please let us go, I said again. Molly's face softened, but Percy didn't let up. We'll make you some dinner when we get back. Aren't pork chops your favorite? She asked sweetly as she opened the van door, pointing the gun at Addison to keep her from jumping out. No, please, please, I started to scream. Percy slapped a hand over my mouth, and as he shoved me into the van, slamming the door shut behind me, Addison grabbed me and pulled me into the very back. She cupped a hand to my ear. Listen, we need to jump them, okay? Together, we might be able to take them. I shook my head. They're psychotic, Addie, and strong. There's no way They know me. Addison looked at me horrified. It's Percy and his wife, you know. My pen pal from 2nd grade. Addison's face went pale. They think I'm their son. If I play the part, maybe I can get us out. They don't like you, but if you obey them, Maybe they'll be nicer, okay? Addison gritted her teeth in protest. Please, Addie. It's the only way. You always say adapt. So let's adapt to the situation. Addison let out a haggard sigh and nodded. I knew how much she hated agreeing to things, especially adults who tell her what to do. I don't remember how long the drive was, but somewhere along the way, I recognized the bridge that led into town, which means we were heading outside of town and farther away from the Landrys. They stopped at a farm. It still had an old-style barn next to the house and a wraparound porch. I heard the barking immediately and knew it was Jukebox. Come on, Molly called when she opened the door. I crawled out first, Addison behind me. Addison had always been good at acting, so when she assumed the role of a meek, terrified girl who'd do anything you'd ask her to, I knew she was acting, even if her performance was a bit too accurate. Jukebox came running up to us from behind a pickup truck, licking both Addison and I. Juke down, Percy called. The dog immediately sat, but looked at me with chocolate brown eyes, tongue hanging out of his face. He made a cute sight, but even though I was meeting the dog I wished was mine, my fear outweighed my childhood excitement. Come on, kids, Percy called. Addison and I entered the house along with Jukebox. I saw Indigo trot towards us from the kitchen. She meowed a greeting and then ran upstairs. Girl, you can follow Indigo. I'm sure you'll know what room is yours, Molly said in a cold voice, portraying just how much she hated her. Addison said a quick yes, ma'am, which I had never heard her utter before, and raced up the stairs. Molly seemed pleased and led me to the kitchen. Here you go, son, Percy said, plating pork chops and green beans on a plate. Molly poured a glass of milk, and I stared at it when they placed it in front of me. What about Addison? Molly frowned. After all she's done to you, she doesn't need dinner, she spit out. I shook my head. But I've been mean to her too. Like the time when we were 4 and we tried to drown each other in the bathtub. Or when I pushed her into the wall and she got a concussion. Or the time Molly cut me off. But you, my dear, have gotten past that. Until she can tame that anger, she doesn't need to eat. I couldn't eat the dinner they had made me. I lied and said I wasn't hungry and that I'd eat it tomorrow. Molly insisted on tucking me in despite the fact I was 13 and that I wasn't her son and that she had just kidnapped me. It was scary seeing how normal she thought her behavior was, reading me a bedtime story and kissing my forehead, wishing me good night and turning on a nightlight with stars all over it. In fact, the whole room was decorated with the universe and stars, because I had told Percy in a letter that I love space. It took 6 days. Addison hadn't eaten anything in that time, and even though we had gone without food before, never for that long. On top of being weak from hunger, she had made them mad by throwing something at Molly when she came in to give her water. When I saw Addison after the beating, I gasped. Her whole body was bruised, and for the first time, she had no fight in her eyes. It terrified me when all I saw in her eyes was loneliness and sadness and pain. We're getting out of here, Addie, I promise. I snagged the keys off the counter on the 5th day and grabbed a painkiller to stick in Jukebox's food later. I took painkillers for Addie on the 6th day and managed to sneak into her room. If the pain was dulled, she'd have more luck moving. I unlocked the door for easy access and played nice the whole time. That built up trust. Just enough trust that they didn't check Addison's room at my request. "She's sleeping," I had said. Molly smiled at me, brushing hair out of my eyes, and said that she wouldn't. And she didn't. I waited until I was sure that they were asleep before walking up the steps, careful to avoid the steps that creaked. I slowly opened Addison's door and helped her limp out. I pointed out what steps creaked and helped her down. I held a screwdriver in my hand as tightly as I could. We went out the back, which didn't have a screen door that creaked. I checked to see if Jukebox was sleeping. He was laying on the porch snoring loudly. I helped Addison to the truck and opened the door slowly before buckling Addison up in the back and taking a deep breath. The engine would wake them up. I had to move quick. Start the truck, throw it into reverse, throw it into drive, and get out. I practiced the motions and finally took a deep breath and started the truck. The engine was so loud, I was confident it would wake up Jukebox. I threw it in reverse and turned the wheel all the way right. The tires spun until they caught gravel and we flew into a 180. I threw the car into drive and took off. I had no idea where I was going, but that didn't matter. As long as we got away from that house, everything would be fine. I just drove. My head barely peeked out enough to see the road. Addison was falling asleep in the back, clutching her broken ribs. "Thanks, Otto," I heard her say, despite the blood rushing into my ears. I drove until I reached a town, and then found the police station. I told them everything and showed them Addison. They got us both to a hospital, got our statements, and called our social worker. Percy and Molly were gone. Where? That still haunts me. I'm 26 now, living with my wife and our 2-year-old son. Addison got her act together and apologized for how she treated me. She's my closest friend besides my wife, but that week changed us both. The GPS on my family's phones are never turned off. No one but me, my wife, and Addison drops my son off at daycare. I never give out my phone number to strangers. Every person I meet, I scrutinize. I keep handcuff keys on me at all times, and I'm constantly paranoid. But despite doing everything to keep my family safe, I've never been able to outrun Percy and Molly. Every year on my birthday since then, I get a birthday card from them. But what scares me the most is when they comment about my son, Alan. When Molly writes, "He looks so much like his father. I can't wait to meet my grandson."